What if the most beloved queen in Disney history was actually the mastermind behind the greatest betrayal in the Pride Lands? For decades, audiences have admired Sarabi as the epitome of loyalty, grace, and noble suffering. She stood by her husband, endured Scar's tyranny, and emerged as a symbol of resilience. But when examining her actions through a different lens, a disturbing pattern emerges. One that suggests Sarabi wasn't the victim of circumstances, but their orchestrator. The first red flag appears in how perfectly Sarabi manages every situation. Unlike other Disney characters who show genuine emotional vulnerability, Sarabi's responses seem calculated, measured, and strategically timed. When Mufasa discusses the responsibilities of kingship, she listens with an expression that reads less like supportive agreement and more like someone taking mental notes. Her positioning during these conversations is telling. She consistently places herself where she can observe both Mufasa and the surrounding Pride members, gauging reactions and filing away information. Consider her interaction patterns throughout the film. Sarabi rarely initiates conversations about Pride matters, instead allowing others to reveal their thoughts first. This isn't wisdom, it's intelligence gathering. She presents herself as the dutiful queen who defers to her husband's judgment, yet she's constantly in positions where she can influence outcomes without appearing to do so. The perfect cover for someone with a hidden agenda. Her relationship with Simba provides another crucial piece of evidence. While Mufasa focuses on preparing Simba for kingship through grand lessons about responsibility and the circle of life, Sarabi's approach is subtler but potentially more influential. She shapes Simba's emotional responses, his trust patterns, and his understanding of family dynamics. A child influenced primarily by his mother's perspective would naturally turn to her for guidance when father figures prove unreliable. Exactly what happens when Simba eventually returns. The most revealing aspect of Sarabi's behavior is her reaction to warning signs about Scar. Any observant lioness would notice Scar's growing resentment and suspicious activities around the Pride. Yet Sarabi never alerts Mufasa to these concerns or suggests increased vigilance. Her silence isn't innocence, it's complicity. She maintains plausible deniability while allowing dangerous situations to develop unchecked. During the elephant graveyard incident, when Mufasa rescues Simba from the hyenas, Sarabi's response is notably restrained. Most mothers would be frantic with worry, demanding explanations and implementing protective measures. Instead, she exhibits measured concern that seems more focused on gauging Mufasa's emotional state than protecting her cub. She's collecting data about how her husband responds to threats against their son, information that would prove valuable to someone planning to exploit those protective instincts. Her body language throughout these scenes tells a story of careful observation rather than genuine participation. She positions herself to maintain visual contact with multiple Pride members simultaneously, her ears consistently angled to catch conversations happening around her, and her expressions shift in micro-movements that suggest active analysis rather than passive listening. These are the behaviors of someone maintaining surveillance, not enjoying family moments. The most damning evidence lies in Sarabi's conspicuous absence during critical moments. When Simba wanders into dangerous territory, when Scar makes increasingly bold moves against Pride traditions, when tensions reach their peak, Sarabi is consistently positioned where she can claim ignorance while maintaining perfect awareness of developments. She's never directly involved in conflicts, yet she's always perfectly informed about their outcomes. Her interactions with other lionesses reveal another layer of her strategy. Sarabi doesn't lead through direct commands or obvious authority. Instead, she guides conversations, plants suggestions, and shapes group opinions through subtle influence. She creates consensus without appearing to manipulate it, ensuring that Pride decisions align with her interests while maintaining her image as a supportive follower rather than a hidden leader. The timing of her actions becomes particularly suspicious when examined against the broader timeline of events. Every major crisis in the Pride occurs when Sarabi has established perfect alibis for herself, while positioning others, particularly Mufasa, for maximum exposure to danger. She ensures she's never the obvious target, while those around her become increasingly vulnerable to existing threats. Perhaps most revealing is her reaction to Mufasa's final conversation about Simba's future. While Mufasa speaks passionately about legacy and responsibility, Sarabi's expression suggests someone listening to information she already knows will never be implemented. Her responses are supportive but lack the investment one would expect from someone planning a shared future. She's already mentally moved beyond this scenario. The moment that crystallizes everything is her reaction when Scar delivers news of the stampede. For a split second, barely perceptible but captured in the animation, her expression shows something other than shock or grief. It's a look of someone receiving expected information, quickly masked by appropriate emotional responses. That micro-expression suggests prior knowledge of events that were supposedly sudden and unexpected. Sarabi's behavior during this crucial scene reveals the true depth of her calculated performance. While other Pride members react with genuine horror and confusion, she immediately shifts into damage control mode, managing the crisis with an efficiency that suggests preparation rather than improvisation. She knows exactly how to guide the Pride's response, which questions to ask, and which emotions to display, because she's already planned for this moment. This level of preparation and control doesn't happen accidentally. It requires planning, coordination, and a willingness to sacrifice the very foundations of trust that supposedly define her character. The perfect queen mask begins to slip when examined this closely, revealing something far more complex and potentially sinister underneath. The most chilling aspect of this analysis is how well Sarabi's alleged deception would work. By maintaining the appearance of loyalty and virtue while orchestrating events from behind the scenes, she could eliminate threats to her influence while positioning herself as the natural leader during subsequent crises. It's a strategy so sophisticated that it has fooled audiences for decades, exactly as intended. The most compelling evidence for Sarabi's hidden agenda lies in her relationship with Scar, a dynamic that makes no sense unless viewed through the lens of secret collaboration. Throughout the film, their interactions follow patterns that suggest coordination rather than opposition, despite their apparent antagonism during Scar's reign. When examined closely, these exchanges reveal a sophisticated partnership designed to fool both the Pride and the audience. Consider their very first interaction after Mufasa's demise. When Scar announces his ascension to the throne, Sarabi's response is notably measured. While other lionesses show visible distress and confusion, Sarabi displays controlled disagreement, the kind of opposition that appears principled but lacks genuine threat. Her body language during this scene is particularly revealing. She maintains direct eye contact with Scar, positions herself at a specific distance that suggests familiarity rather than fear, and her vocal protests follow a rhythm that seems almost rehearsed. More telling is what Scar doesn't do to Sarabi during his reign. Every other aspect of Mufasa's legacy faces systematic dismantling. Traditions abandoned, loyal advisors marginalized, even the physical appearance of Pride Rock altered to reflect the new order. Yet Sarabi retains her position, her influence among the lionesses, and, remarkably, her life. Scar, who demonstrates ruthless efficiency in eliminating threats, allows his predecessor's mate to remain as a focal point for potential resistance. This makes no strategic sense unless Sarabi posed no actual threat to his rule. The explanation becomes clear when examining their private interactions during the drought years. Their confrontations follow a specific pattern. Sarabi challenges Scar's methods just enough to maintain credibility with the other lionesses, while Scar responds with threats that never escalate to actual consequences. It's political theater designed to maintain the illusion of opposition while protecting both parties' interests. Sarabi gets to preserve her reputation as the noble resistance leader, while Scar avoids the complications of actually silencing her. Their most revealing exchange occurs during the confrontation about the Pride's hunting failures. Sarabi accuses Scar of destroying the Pride lands, but her timing is significant. She delivers this challenge in front of the other lionesses, creating a public display of defiance that serves both their needs. Scar gets to demonstrate his dominance through his response, while Sarabi establishes her credentials as the Pride's moral center. Neither pushes the conflict to its logical conclusion, suggesting both understand the boundaries of their performance. The visual evidence supports this theory of coordination. Throughout their scenes together, Sarabi and Scar maintain spatial relationships that indicate familiarity and controlled tension rather than genuine hostility. They position themselves within specific ranges that allow for dramatic dialogue while ensuring neither is actually vulnerable to surprise attacks. Their eye contact patterns follow the rhythms of negotiation rather than confrontation. Brief glances that acknowledge shared understanding, followed by longer stares designed for public consumption. Most significantly, Sarabi demonstrates detailed knowledge of Scar's plans and motivations that she couldn't possess without inside information. When she speaks to other lionesses about the situation, her explanations reveal understanding of Scar's broader strategy, his alliance with the hyenas, and his long-term objectives. This intelligence couldn't come from casual observation. It requires access to information that only a collaborator would possess. The timing of Sarabi's actions consistently benefits Scar's agenda while maintaining her cover. When Pride members express doubts about the new regime, Sarabi's interventions channel their discontent into manageable forms that don't threaten Scar's actual power. She becomes a pressure valve that prevents genuine rebellion while creating the appearance of resistance. Her influence keeps the lionesses united under her leadership rather than scattered into multiple opposition groups that might prove more difficult for Scar to control. Her knowledge of pride dynamics proves invaluable to Scar's rule in ways that aren't immediately obvious. Sarabi understands the relationships, rivalries, and loyalties among the lionesses better than anyone. This information allows Scar to make strategic decisions about resource allocation, hunting assignments, and social management that prevent the complete collapse of pride structure. Without this insider knowledge, his reign would likely have ended in chaos rather than the controlled decline we observe. The drought itself provides another piece of evidence for their coordination. Sarabi's responses to the crisis are perfectly calibrated to maintain pressure on Scar without actually destabilizing his rule. She voices complaints that echo legitimate concerns while stopping short of actions that would force Scar into corner, where violent retaliation becomes necessary. She manages the pride's discontent expertly, keeping hope alive while preventing desperation that might lead to actual revolt. Perhaps most damning is Sarabi's reaction to news of Simba's return. When reports begin circulating about a strange lion in the Pride Lands, her response suggests prior knowledge rather than surprise. She doesn't express the wonder or desperate hope that would be natural for a mother who believed her son was gone forever. Instead, she demonstrates the controlled anticipation of someone whose careful planning is finally reaching fruition. Her positioning during Simba's return reveals the culmination of her strategy. She's perfectly placed to serve as the bridge between the returning heir and the pride he left behind. Her credibility as the suffering queen mother makes her the ideal figure to legitimize Simba's claim while providing continuity between the old order and the new. She emerges from the crisis not as a victim who survived, but as a leader who guided her people through darkness toward restoration. The sophistication of this alleged partnership suggests extensive planning and coordination. Sarabi and Scar would have needed to establish communication channels, coordinate their public performances, and maintain their deception across years of supposed hostility. This level of conspiracy requires not just shared goals, but mutual trust and sophisticated understanding of political manipulation, qualities that both characters demonstrate throughout the story. The genius of their arrangement lies in its perfect cover story. By maintaining the appearance of antagonism, they deflect suspicion while achieving their respective objectives. Scar gets stable rule without the complications of popular resistance, while Sarabi positions herself as the natural leader during the transition back to legitimate authority. Neither appears responsible for Mufasa's fate, yet both benefit enormously from his absence. This alliance also explains anomalies in both characters' behavior that make little sense when viewed through the traditional interpretation. Scar's restraint towards Sarabi, her detailed knowledge of his plans, their perfectly choreographed confrontations, and her seamless transition back to power all become logical when understood as elements of a coordinated deception rather than genuine conflict. The most chilling aspect of this theory is how well it would work in practice. By maintaining the illusion of opposition while secretly coordinating their actions, Sarabi and Scar could manipulate events with minimal risk of exposure. Their apparent enmity provides perfect cover for what may be one of the most sophisticated political conspiracies in Disney history. Understanding Sarabi's potential involvement requires examining what she stood to gain from Mufasa's removal, and the analysis reveals benefits that extend far beyond simple power acquisition. The traditional narrative presents their marriage as a loving partnership, but closer examination suggests tensions and limitations that could have motivated Sarabi toward drastic solutions. The first motive lies in the restrictive nature of Mufasa's leadership style. Despite his noble intentions, Mufasa operates as a traditional patriarchal ruler who makes major decisions unilaterally while expecting his mate to provide support rather than input. Sarabi's intelligence and political acumen are consistently underutilized in this dynamic. She possesses sophisticated understanding of pride politics, individual lioness motivations, and social management. skills that remain largely untapped while Mufasa focuses on grand gestures and philosophical pronouncements about responsibility. This intellectual stagnation would prove particularly frustrating for someone of Sarabi's capabilities. She demonstrates strategic thinking that rivals or exceeds Mufasa's own, yet she's relegated to ceremonial roles and emotional support functions. The partnership that once felt balanced during their youth has evolved into a limiting arrangement where her potential remains unrealized. For an ambitious individual, this situation becomes increasingly intolerable over time. The power dynamics within their relationship reveal another crucial motivation. While Mufasa embodies the visible authority of kingship, Sarabi wields the subtler but equally important influence over social cohesion and cultural continuity. She understands that removing Mufasa wouldn't eliminate her power. It would simply change its expression from hidden influence to direct leadership. During a crisis or transition period, the pride would naturally turn to her for guidance, elevating her from supporting role to central authority. Simba's presence adds a compelling dimension to her motivations. As Mufasa's heir, Simba represents both opportunity and threat to Sarabi's long-term influence. Under normal circumstances, she would gradually lose authority as Simba matures and eventually takes a mate who becomes the new queen. However, if Simba grows up primarily under her guidance, particularly during formative experiences that shape his understanding of leadership, she could maintain significant influence throughout his reign. Mufasa's removal would make her the dominant parental figure during Simba's crucial developmental years. Her strategic positioning supports this interpretation. Sarabi consistently involves herself in Simba's education, but her lessons focus on different aspects than Mufasa's grand tutorials about royal responsibility. She teaches practical social skills, emotional intelligence, and the importance of listening to advisors, particularly maternal figures who understand pride dynamics. These lessons would prove invaluable to a young king who needs guidance navigating complex political situations. The timing of events suggests Sarabi recognized her window of opportunity. Simba has reached an age where he's impressionable but not yet independent, making him ideal for shaping according to her vision of leadership. Mufasa's growing focus on formal heir preparation threatens to diminish her influence over Simba's development, creating urgency around any plans for changing the family dynamic. The longer she waits, the more entrenched Mufasa's vision becomes in Simba's mind. Sarabi's silence about Scar's growing threat provides the clearest evidence of deliberate enabling. Any observant lioness would notice Scar's increasing resentment, his suspicious absence during important pride activities, and his cultivation of relationships with hyenas. Sarabi's failure to alert Mufasa to these warning signs can't be attributed to naivety. She demonstrates too much political awareness for such oversight. Her silence suggests either complicity or a calculated decision to allow dangerous situations to develop. The information she could provide to facilitate Scar's plans would prove invaluable. Sarabi knows Mufasa's daily routines, his emotional triggers, and his predictable responses to various scenarios. She understands which situations would draw him away from safety, and which appeals to his protective instincts would override his caution. This insider knowledge would allow Scar to design traps with confidence, knowing exactly how his brother would respond to specific stimuli. Her awareness of Mufasa's relationship with Simba provides particularly useful intelligence. She knows that threats to their cub would provoke immediate and potentially reckless responses from Mufasa. She understands the dynamics of their father-son interactions well enough to predict how Mufasa would react to news of Simba being in danger. This knowledge makes her an invaluable asset for anyone planning to exploit Mufasa's protective instincts. The gorge incident itself bears hallmarks of someone with intimate knowledge of family patterns. The scenario perfectly exploits Mufasa's character flaws: his tendency toward heroic action without sufficient planning, his willingness to rush into danger when Simba is threatened, and his trust in family members even when circumstances seem suspicious. Only someone who understood these psychological patterns could design such an effective trap. Sarabi's absence during the crucial morning becomes particularly significant when viewed through this lens. Her positioning ensures she has perfect alibis while remaining close enough to monitor developments. She's never directly involved in dangerous activities, yet she's consistently positioned to receive immediate updates about their outcomes. This pattern suggests careful planning rather than coincidental timing. The coordination required for this conspiracy would demand sophisticated communication and timing. Sarabi would need to provide Scar with regular updates about Mufasa's schedule, emotional state, and planned activities. She would need to ensure her own whereabouts provided unshakable alibis, while maintaining positions that allowed her to guide pride responses once news of tragedy arrived. This level of orchestration requires extensive advanced planning and perfect execution. Her psychological preparation for the aftermath becomes evident in her immediate responses to crisis. While other Pride members struggle with shock and confusion, Sarabi transitions smoothly into crisis management mode. She knows exactly which emotions to display, which questions to ask, and which actions to take to guide the Pride through trauma toward acceptance of new circumstances. This level of preparedness suggests she mentally rehearsed these scenarios long before they occurred. The most sophisticated aspect of her alleged involvement lies in her ability to maintain emotional authenticity while executing deception. If Sarabi orchestrated Mufasa's removal, she would need to generate genuine grief responses while managing the complex logistics of crisis response. This requires exceptional psychological control and acting ability, qualities she demonstrates throughout her interactions during the drought years. Her long-term planning extends beyond immediate crisis management toward future power consolidation. By positioning herself as the grieving widow who guided the Pride through darkness, she creates a narrative that justifies her continued influence while deflecting any suspicion about her role in creating the crisis. She emerges not as someone who benefited from tragedy, but as someone who sacrificed personal happiness for the greater good. The elegance of this strategy lies in its perfect cover story. Every action that serves her interests can be interpreted as noble sacrifice or maternal devotion. Her guidance of Simba appears protective rather than manipulative. Her resistance to Scar seems principled rather than theatrical. Her emergence as a leader looks like natural consequence rather than planned outcome. The perfect crime disguised as perfect virtue. The most damning evidence against Sarabi lies not in what she does, but in how she does it. Her responses to Mufasa's demise follow patterns that suggest theatrical performance rather than authentic grief, revealing calculated emotional displays designed to maintain her cover while achieving strategic objectives. When examined frame by frame, her reactions tell a story of someone managing a crisis she helped create rather than someone devastated by unexpected tragedy. The initial moment when Scar delivers news of the stampede provides the first crucial evidence. Sarabi's facial expression sequence reveals a micro-reaction that occurs before her grief response begins. For approximately 2 frames, barely perceptible in normal viewing, her expression shows something resembling confirmation rather than shock. This fleeting look suggests someone receiving expected information rather than devastating news. Only when other Pride members begin reacting does her performance of grief commence, perfectly timed to match their emotional responses. Her immediate transition into crisis management mode reveals another layer of preparation. While genuine grief typically involves periods of disorientation and emotional overwhelm, Sarabi maintains remarkable clarity about priorities and procedures. She knows exactly which questions to ask, which Pride members to console first, and which practical matters require immediate attention. This level of functional capability during supposed trauma indicates either superhuman emotional control or advanced preparation for the scenario. The physical manifestations of her grief follow patterns that suggest conscious choreography rather than spontaneous emotion. Her positioning during mourning scenes consistently places her where she can observe other Pride members' reactions while maintaining visual contact with Scar. Her body language conveys sorrow through deliberate gestures, lowered head at precise angles, calculated timing of sighs and tears, movements that appear devastated while remaining strategically positioned for maximum visual impact on her audience. Most revealing is her interaction with Simba during this crucial period. Rather than the protective clutching and desperate reassurance typical of mothers in crisis, Sarabi maintains enough emotional distance to guide Simba's responses. She provides comfort that soothes his immediate distress while subtly directing his attention away from potentially dangerous questions about the circumstances of Mufasa's demise. Her maternal responses serve dual purposes, appearing appropriately nurturing while preventing inconvenient investigations. The speed of her adaptation to new circumstances becomes particularly suspicious when compared to other Pride members' adjustment periods. While the lionesses struggle with shock and disbelief for days following the tragedy, Sarabi demonstrates remarkable resilience in accepting the new reality. She doesn't waste time questioning the official story or demanding detailed explanations about how events unfolded. Instead, she focuses immediately on managing the Pride's transition under new leadership, behavior that suggests prior mental preparation for this scenario. Her resistance to Scar during his reign follows theatrical patterns that maintain credibility without creating genuine threat. The timing of her confrontations consistently occurs when other lionesses are present to witness her defiance, establishing her credentials as their moral leader. Yet these challenges never escalate beyond verbal sparring that serves both parties' interests. Sarabi gets to demonstrate principled opposition, while Scar avoids the complications of actually silencing the pride's emotional center. The content of her opposition reveals strategic intelligence that undermines the authenticity of her grief. Her criticisms of Scar's rule demonstrate detailed understanding of his methods, motivations, and long-term strategy. She speaks knowledgeably about the political implications of his alliance with hyenas, the economic consequences of his policies, and the social dynamics he's creating within the pride. This level of analytical awareness suggests someone monitoring the situation strategically, rather than someone consumed by personal loss. Her emotional regulation during the drought years provides perhaps the strongest evidence of performance over authenticity. Genuine grief, especially complicated by ongoing stress and loss, typically involves periods of emotional volatility, depression, and inconsistent functioning. Sarabi maintains remarkable emotional stability throughout this period, consistently available to provide leadership and guidance to other Pride members. Her psychological resilience appears almost superhuman, unless viewed as the behavior of someone who feels satisfaction rather than devastation about recent changes. The absence of investigation into Mufasa's demise represents another crucial failure of authentic grief. Loving partners typically obsess over details surrounding their mate's final moments, seeking understanding of what happened and why. Sarabi demonstrates remarkable acceptance of the official story without pursuing additional information. She never questions witnesses, examines the scene, or seeks clarification about timeline inconsistencies. This passive acceptance suggests either profound denial or prior knowledge that makes investigation unnecessary. Her interactions with other lionesses during this period reveal sophisticated manipulation disguised as mutual support. Rather than sharing her supposed grief in ways that would create genuine bonding, Sarabi uses emotional conversations to gather intelligence about pride sentiment and guide group responses. She positions herself as the confidant who absorbs others' fears and doubts while providing reassurance that serves her strategic interests. She's managing group psychology rather than processing personal trauma. The narrative she constructs about this period becomes crucial to her long-term strategy. Sarabi doesn't just endure Scar's reign, she creates a story about her endurance that serves multiple purposes. She becomes the noble widow who sacrificed personal happiness to protect her pride, the loyal queen mother who preserved Mufasa's legacy through dark times, and the suffering matriarch whose wisdom guided others through crisis. This narrative transforms her from potential suspect to inevitable hero. Her physical appearance during the drought years supports the performance theory rather than genuine suffering. While other Pride members show visible signs of stress, malnourishment, and psychological strain, Sarabi maintains remarkable condition considering the circumstances. Her coat remains relatively lustrous, her posture conveys strength rather than defeat, and her energy levels stay consistent with leadership demands. Either she has access to resources unavailable to others, or her psychological state differs significantly from what she projects. The timing of her emotional displays becomes particularly suspicious when examined against practical needs. Her moments of visible grief consistently occur when maximum emotional impact will serve strategic purposes, rallying other lionesses around shared suffering, demonstrating her credibility as Mufasa's loyal mate, or creating sympathy that deflects potential suspicion. Her private moments, by contrast, reveal someone focused on practical leadership concerns rather than personal loss processing. Her preparation for Simba's eventual return provides the final piece of evidence for calculated performance. Throughout the dark years, Sarabi maintains specific narratives about Mufasa's legacy and Simba's rightful place that serve her long-term interests. She doesn't simply preserve memory, she shapes it in ways that position her as the natural bridge between past glory and future restoration. Her grief becomes a qualification for continued influence rather than simply emotional processing. The sophistication of this alleged performance requires extraordinary psychological control and strategic thinking. Maintaining authentic-seeming grief responses while executing complex political manipulation demands skills that few individuals possess. Yet, Sarabi demonstrates precisely these capabilities throughout her interactions during the crisis period, suggesting someone managing a carefully orchestrated deception rather than someone devastated by unexpected loss. The most chilling aspect of this analysis is how effectively the performance achieves its intended goals. By appearing to suffer nobly while actually benefiting strategically, Sarabi transforms potential suspicion into admiration. Her supposed victimhood becomes her greatest strength, providing unshakable credibility that serves her interests throughout the remainder of the story. The perfect crime disguised as perfect sacrifice, executed with flawless precision. The final proof of Sarabi's orchestration lies in her reaction to Simba's return, a response that reveals not maternal joy, but the satisfaction of a plan reaching its intended conclusion. When Rafiki announces that Simba lives, Sarabi's expression contains elements that don't align with a mother's desperate hope finally fulfilled. Instead, her face shows the controlled anticipation of someone whose carefully laid strategy is entering its final phase. Her immediate positioning during Simba's confrontation with Scar provides crucial evidence of foreknowledge. Rather than the confused positioning of someone experiencing unexpected developments, Sarabi places herself exactly where she can influence the outcome while maintaining perfect safety. She's close enough to intervene if necessary, positioned to address both Simba and the Pride, yet distant enough to avoid any physical danger from the conflict. This strategic placement suggests someone who knows what's coming, rather than someone surprised by events. The timing of her interventions during the final battle reveals sophisticated coordination with Simba's assault. Her challenges to Scar escalate precisely when they can provide maximum support for Simba's psychological warfare, undermining Scar's confidence while bolstering her son's moral authority. She doesn't simply react to developments, she actively shapes them through perfectly timed revelations about past events and present realities. Her contributions feel orchestrated rather than spontaneous. Most significantly, her seamless transition back to power after Scar's defeat exposes the true scope of her long-term planning. Within moments of the old regime's collapse, Sarabi resumes her role as Queen Mother with an efficiency that suggests preparation rather than adaptation. She immediately begins organizing Pride restoration, managing relationships between former enemies, and establishing her position as the bridge between Simba's rightful rule and the Pride's recent experiences. This level of readiness requires advanced planning for multiple scenarios. Her handling of the reconciliation between Simba and the former outsiders reveals strategic thinking that extends beyond simple maternal protection. Rather than focusing solely on her son's welfare, she demonstrates sophisticated understanding of political necessity and social healing. She guides conversations, manages tensions, and facilitates compromises with the skill of someone who has thought extensively about post-conflict reconstruction. This expertise doesn't develop overnight. It requires long-term strategic planning. The masterstroke of her alleged conspiracy becomes clear when examining the ultimate outcome of events. By orchestrating Mufasa's removal and enabling Scar's rise, Sarabi eliminates two potential threats to her long-term influence. Mufasa's patriarchal leadership style would have gradually diminished her authority as Simba matured and took a mate. Scar's eventual instability and excesses would have created ongoing threats to Pride's security and her son's inheritance. By allowing both to destroy each other, she clears the path for a future where she remains the dominant influence behind a grateful and dependent ruler. This theory explains numerous inconsistencies in the traditional narrative that have puzzled audiences for decades. Why does Scar allow Sarabi to maintain her influence during his reign? Because she's secretly supporting his rule while maintaining plausible opposition. Why does she demonstrate such detailed knowledge of political developments during the Dark Years? Because she's receiving insider information through hidden coordination. Why does she transition so smoothly back to power after Scar's defeat? Because she never actually lost it. She simply changed how it was expressed. The psychological profile that emerges from this analysis reveals a character far more complex and sophisticated than traditional interpretations suggest. Rather than the noble sufferer of Disney legend, Sarabi appears as a master manipulator who recognizes that visible power attracts scrutiny while hidden influence provides greater security. She understands that appearing victimized generates sympathy and deflects suspicion, while seeming virtuous creates unshakable credibility for future endeavors. Her relationship with Simba takes on sinister implications when viewed through this lens. Rather than simple maternal love, her devotion to her son represents investment in her future power base. By shaping his emotional development, political understanding, and leadership philosophy during his formative years, she ensures that his eventual rule will align with her vision and depend heavily on her guidance. She's not just protecting her child, she's molding her successor. The comparison with other Disney characters who weren't what they initially appeared makes this theory more plausible rather than less so. Disney has a long history of subverting audience expectations about character motivations, revealing hidden depths and secret agendas that transform our understanding of entire narratives. Sarabi's alleged deception would represent the ultimate expression of this storytelling tradition. The perfect character whose perfection itself becomes suspicious. The sophisticated nature of her alleged conspiracy demonstrates intelligence and strategic thinking that rivals the greatest political masterminds in Disney history. She maintains multiple deceptions simultaneously, coordinates with unreliable allies, adapts to changing circumstances, and emerges victorious from a complex multi-year operation without ever appearing to be anything other than a loyal wife and devoted mother. If true, this represents perhaps the most successful manipulation in Disney canon. The evidence for this theory isn't definitive. It relies on interpretation of subtle visual cues, analysis of behavioral patterns, and inference from circumstantial evidence. Yet the consistency of these elements across multiple scenes and years of storytime creates a compelling case that Sarabi's actions follow logical patterns only if she possessed foreknowledge and hidden agendas. The alternative explanations require accepting remarkable coincidences and implausible levels of passive acceptance from someone clearly intelligent enough to understand political dynamics. The most disturbing aspect of this revelation is how completely it would fool audiences. Exactly as intended, by maintaining perfect emotional authenticity while executing sophisticated deception, Sarabi transforms potential suspicion into admiration. Her supposed suffering becomes her greatest strength, providing unshakable moral authority that serves her interests throughout the story. She achieves the impossible, benefiting enormously from tragedy while appearing to be its greatest victim. This interpretation transforms our understanding of the entire Lion King narrative from a simple story about good triumphing over evil into a complex political thriller about hidden manipulation and long-term strategic thinking. The real villain isn't the obvious antagonist who announces his evil intentions, but the perfect character whose virtue disguises her true agenda. The greatest threat to the Pride Lands wasn't the usurper who ruled through fear, but the queen who shaped events through invisible influence. The ultimate question becomes not whether Sarabi orchestrated these events, but whether it matters. If her manipulations ultimately restored legitimate rule, protected the Pride from long-term threats, and ensured stability for future generations, do her methods invalidate the positive outcomes? Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that Sarabi represents not a villain disguised as a hero, but a true leader whose understanding of power requires moral compromises that heroes can't make. In the end, Sarabi's story may be the most realistic political narrative Disney has ever created, a reminder that real leadership often requires hidden sacrifices, impossible choices, and strategies so sophisticated that they must remain forever secret. The perfect queen achieved perfect outcomes through perfectly hidden means, leaving audiences to celebrate her virtue while remaining forever unaware of her true genius. The Pride prospers, Simba rules wisely, and Sarabi maintains her influence as the beloved queen mother whose suffering during dark times proved her nobility. The perfect ending to the perfect plan, executed by the perfect character whose perfection itself should have been the ultimate warning sign. Perhaps the real lesson of The Lion King isn't about the circle of life, but about the circles of deception that true power requires, and the dangerous intelligence of those who understand that sometimes the greatest service to others requires becoming something they could never forgive if they knew the truth.